Over the last year or so, I've received a lot of questions about technique, and mostly from guys wanting to audition for corps in the future and just needing general guidance. I'll go on and tell you the major things that everybody focuses on, no matter where you go, is flow, consistency, tone, and technique. Now, by flow, meaning transitions from one thing to another. If you're playing grid patterns, it doesn't matter if you're going from triplets to quadruplets, or singles to doubles. Um, you know, it just has to evenly blend into the next segment, so to speak. Um, Consistency, making sure, and that could be more roped into technique actually, but just making sure everything's even, making sure you're getting a good solid sound, making sure your strokes are the same height, playing in the same spot of the head unless otherwise noted in the music. Um, let's see, what else? Tone, getting a good even stroke, getting a full sound out of the drum. I'll touch on that a little bit in this as well. And overall technique. Now technique will obviously vary from corps to corps. Nobody's really the same, even though it may seem so. But just learn whichever corps you're intending to go after, or whatever your line, be it high school or college, um, indoor, WGI, what have you. Just learn their technique and adapt it to your hands. That's the most important thing. I went through that a lot when I marched. Okay. One phrase that's normally tossed around that I like to harp on, and most drum corps do, is playing through the head, which goes into tone. Now, you can play, let's say, a 6-inch tap with that volume, which is very light, very thin, not desired, ultimately, in the long run. Or you can get a much louder sound without being too brittle, or not too brittle, but too harsh, and just sort of dig into the head. You're not sitting there overcompensating for it. You're just playing more into the drum head itself. Same with the left hand. You either play your 6-inch relaxed tap like so, or playing through. So try to avoid weak strokes at all costs, because ultimately that's one thing that, if the guy standing next to you at your auditions playing through the head and you're just tapping lightly, ultimately he's more likely to get the gig because he already has, an advantage over you. Technique, like I said, varies from corps to corps. Your basic grip in the right hand. Some corps will have you play where the stick is in alignment with your arm there, whereas others will have you play slightly out to the side, so, in the line, out to the side. Your grip in the right hand, you always want to keep this closed. Very important. Nobody likes to see a guy playing a drum like that, so they'll get real on you about that. You don't want to force your technique, but you want to keep a good solid fulcrum right here in between the index. Generally, the first knuckle of the index finger and the thumb is where your major point will be, and then the rest of your fingers will just wrap around in a relaxed form. And it's pretty much just a wrist stroke with combination of fingers. Now, as you get lower into the head, you're going to have more fingers than wrist, and as you play higher, it's going to be more relaxed fingers playing with the wrist. Left hand technique, unless you're playing, I believe it's French grip traditional, which is pinky out like so. Most guys are just going to have you wrap your fingers around like that. Stick rests on the cuticle of your ring finger in the left hand, comes in there. Your fulcrum is based right here. Thumb should generally touch between the first and second knuckle varying on which chord you're with or what your technique is or what your instructor likes. Middle finger wraps around and matches it. You generally try and keep your middle finger from coming off of the stick so you have a nice even look. And your pinky finger mirrors your ring finger. So that's your basic technique as far as traditional grip goes. Playing spots, depending on which zone on the drum you're playing, be it, center, middle, edge, back, 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock, whatever, depending on what the music calls for. You always want to have, or always strive to have your tips in the same region with a good even stroke. So I'm not jumping around like that in the head or like that. That plays into consistency as well. Now, obviously, if your music calls you to play center and edge, then that's what you do. But most of the time you want to stay good and even. One exercise in particular to work on that's really good for that is doing anything with double stops. And a double stop, as most of you may know or should know, it's just a double vertical stroke, and you want both your tips to hit the head at the same time. Now I'm a little sloppy because I've been out of it, but you basically want it to sound the same as if you're tapping just singles. And that's good for looking down and seeing, making sure that you're playing in the right stroke area, so to speak, making sure your tips are consistent. Stick heights. And one other item I'd like to point out. I know a lot of guys, when we're all younger, I used to do it too big time. Anytime you run an exercise, everybody wants to end it with a shot or a loud accent. Don't do that. Especially when you go in for core auditions, they will get on you faster than you could imagine about that. Especially if your exercises or whatever, Unless the music calls for an accent, consider it to be just a tap. Everybody likes that big ending, especially out in the lot, but that's not what your instructors or your caption head or your techs are going to be looking for. So again, good technique, consistent sound, playing zones, even strokes. An exercise to work on as well. Santa Clara Vanguard, I believe it was 2004, there was an exercise called Flammus, and if you don't know it or you can't find it, shoot me an email and I'll send it your way. It's a great exercise to work on. It's pretty much grid patterns all worked into a lock warm-up.